Hello and welcome everyone. This is Jennifer McGuire and I hope you're having a good week. Well, today I am here to share more ideas for using the Wreath Builder templates from Gina K Designs. Usually I try to focus on techniques that can be used with lots of products, but sometimes a product comes along that is just worth sharing, and this is one of them. If you have not seen my first Wreath Builder video, please check that out because it shows the basics of using the Wreath Builder, and I'll link to it here. Today I am building on those ideas and sharing more things you can do with these templates. So these are the Gina K Wreath Builder templates or stencils. So there are two. One is for a piece of paper that is 4 by 4, and one is for a piece of paper that is 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 inches. I'll be using the 4 by 4 today. That's the one I reach for the most. These are inexpensive and now available just for the templates. It used to be as part of a bundle with a stamp set, but now you can get the templates alone. For these templates, you need some sort of stamping tool. I'll be using the MISTI today, along with the 4" by 4" template. I put it into the corner of my MISTI and hold it there with a magnet, and then I have a piece of cardstock that is cut to 4" by 4". I'll show you some other size papers you can use later in this video, but most of the time I do 4 by 4. Now this is the original Gina K Designs Wreath Builder stamp set. This came out a while ago and is the one that I featured in my last video. I'll be using a few images from it today. However, I'm focusing mostly on using the newest Gina K Wreath Builder stamp set. This is the autumn version. And this has lots of things that you can use for autumn cards or Thanksgiving cards, but also things you could use year-round. Keep in mind you can use other small images or even larger images, which I'll show you later in this video. Let's start with this card first and do the stamping. Then I'll show you how I made a tri-fold card. I decided to tape the 4" by 4" template into my MISTI just to keep it there, and I have a 4" by 4" piece of white cardstock. To create a perfect wreath, I like to start with the biggest image. In this case, it's a flower. It's pretty small, but that's kind of the focal point of this wreath. And I position it right about there in the corner. That way I can end up with a nice round wreath that fits perfectly on this 4 by 4 piece. Okay, so I have the paper in my template and it's time to start stamping. I'm using the Gina K Sweet Corn ink, and I'm stamping it twice just to make the ink a little darker. I then do one rotation. I just turn it one notch in the template and I stamp it again. Again, I'm double stamping for a darker color. Here I'll turn it one more notch and I'll do the same thing. So each time I'm just turning it one notch. If you want to have less images, you could turn it 2 notches. There are many things you can do with this template, and I have another video planned where I show you how to use it for creating things that aren't patterns or wreaths. A lot of things you can do with it. Okay, so I will continue to go around stamping this with the Sweet Corn ink, doubling it each time. Double stamping is a great way to get a new color from inks you have. It just gives you a darker result. I felt the first stamping was a little too light for the look I was going for, so double stamping did the trick. With this card design, I want to die cut a circle from the center. So I'm going to trace a circle there so I know where to position my stamping around it. I don't want too much of it to be covered up in the center. So I have the circle die that I plan to use, and I'm going to trace it at the center of our white piece of cardstock. I want to make sure I get it centered, so I'm using my T-roller to draw 2 lines right down the center horizontally and vertically, and where those intersect I know is the center of my paper. So now I can take my circle die and easily find out where the center is by centering it on the little crosshatch in the center. So I'll trace that circle die with a pencil. Now I'm going to trace it lightly, but I can promise you there is a circle there at the center. Okay, so now we can go back to our stamping. I want to keep everything pretty much around that. So I like to next, after I do my focal image, which was the yellow flower, go in and add some leaves around it. And I like the images to be super close to each other. I find you get a better wreath if the images are very close to each other or even touching slightly. This time I'm using the Gina K Grass Green ink. You can use a full ink pad for this, but if you have ink cubes, I do recommend using those. since these are small images and you can quickly stamp a bunch. Okay, so after I did that, I positioned another leaf very close to the flower, and I like to make sure my leaves go in both directions, towards the outside of the wreath and towards the inside. And you can see at any point you could stop, even with just these two leaves and the flower, you could stop and have a beautiful wreath. But I like to really make them full and keep adding images. So I'm taking a couple little leaf images from that original Wreath Builder stamp set, and I'm stamping 2 of them at once. That saves me a bit of time. So one of the things you can do is stamp multiple images with each turn. I do find it easier if those multiple images are the same ink color. Now I wanted some berries, and I looked around in my stamp sets, and I found this older Simon Says stamp, Let Us Rejoice stamp set, had a cluster of little dot images. And I cut them apart so I would have a bunch of little dots, and these are perfect for berries. Look at your stamp sets. There are often tiny little images that are great to add to your wreath building. This time I'm adding Gina K Peach Bellini, which is a nice muted peach color. I just think it's beautiful. And I'm using that to stamp a few berries here and there on the wreath. Berries like this are great for filling in tiny little openings and making your wreath appear fuller. So now it's time to die cut the circle in the center. So I'm taping the circle die right in the center of our piece. I have also prepared a note card that's made from sweet corn cardstock from Gina K, and it is 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 inches. So this will be a square card. I'm taping the panel right in the center of the front of the card, and we're going to die cut through both layers. That way we'll have a window going through to the inside of the card. Next, I'm adhering the panel to the front of the card. I could have done this before I did the die cutting, but I wanted to make sure it cut through both layers. Next, after this, you need to create another 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 yellow note card, same as the first one, but we're going to take it and just cut a little bit off the bottom where the opening is, just a little bit. That will allow us to create a trifold card. We're going to put the one that we just created inside of the stamped card. So I'm putting glue on the inside of the stamped card, the one that has the hole in the front. Put a lot of glue in there. You want to make sure this stays secure. Then you're taking the other note card that we just cut a little off of and adhering it inside upside down. So when the person gets the card, they open the stamped flap up and then open this downward. And that way you can stamp or write or stamp a sentiment inside of the card, and it won't show through the front window. Now in the front window, I do want to have one sentiment, so I'm using my anti-static powder tool, stamping a thank you sentiment with VersaMark ink, and then I'll add gold embossing powder. This thank you sentiment is from the Gina K Designs Autumn Wreath Builder stamp set that I used to create the wreath. There are lots of great sentiments that are perfectly sized to go inside of the wreath, and I really like this particular one. I also added a bit of gold embossing to the center of each of the yellow flowers just to tie it all together. So here you can see the technique of die cutting a window in the center of your wreath so you can show a sentiment on the inside, and also how to create a trifold card so you have a place for your personal message. This is a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 inch note card. I like to use 4 1/2 inch square envelopes for those, and I'll link to the ones I like below. But you could also use a traditional envelope for this size. Now on these envelopes, I did stamp a Gina K Happy Mail stamp set image. It says handmade card inside. I've used this stamp set many times in previous videos. It's excellent for stamping on matching envelopes, and I highly recommend it. Okay, my next idea is to actually cut out the wreath you create so you have a dimensional look, and I really like this look. I again have my focal point image, this flower, and I usually start with my focal point image about a 1/2 inch in from the outside of the cardstock. That seems to be a good position. One thing to keep in mind, the closer your images are to the center of your cardstock piece, the closer they'll be together, the tighter they will be. The farther out you put them towards the outside edge, the more space will be between your images. Once you create a few wreaths, you'll get a better idea of where to position things. Okay, now for this one, I want to make sure that I leave enough room for a sentiment. The sentiment that I'm using is the Hello Friend that's in this Inspiring Poppies stamp set. This one has lots of great sentiments, and I like that it's a smaller set, so it's a great price point. I added a few little yellow flowers, but before I add anything towards the inside of the wreath, I wanted to put my sentiment there just as a holding place, so I don't overlap. This time, to save a little bit of effort, I have 2 images positioned, and I will stamp those with green ink. So I'm saving time by doing 2 at once. And you really can position your image anywhere on the wreath and close the MISTI door on it and start stamping. And if you rotate it all the way around the template, you'll fill in your wreath nicely. It's really effortless to create these wreaths and so much fun. So I continued to add small images to fill in the open spots. You can put as much as you want on these or as little as you want, and you'll get a different look every time. Next, I'm using my scissors to cut around the wreath and to cut out the center. There are no coordinating dies available for wreaths, since every time you'll get a different size and shape. To cut in the center, I poke my scissors through the center, and I start cutting in a circle until I'm close to the edge of the stamping, and then I start cutting that out. This takes a little bit of time and effort, but I think it's worth it, because when you put foam tape behind the cut-out wreath, you get an amazing wreath shape that I think is really cool, so definitely worth the effort. I do find it's very helpful to cut a hole in the center first. It helps to get your scissor into that tight space. After I cut it out, I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card that I've adhered a piece of craft cardstock to. I'm also die cutting a window in the front of this. So I'm just tracing the center of my wreath onto the front, and I've picked a circle die that's bigger than that area. I'm holding it right to the front of the card, and I'll run that through my die cut machine, and it'll cut through both the craft and the white. I now have an opening right at the center of my wreath. I also adhered another piece of craft cardstock inside of the card so that when you peek through the window, you see that color. I'll add some foam tape to the back of my wreath and add it right over the die cut window. Foam tape makes a big difference because it really makes the wreath stand out more. Into the window opening, I white heat embossed my sentiment so that it shows through on the front, but is also in the inside, and we can write a personal message underneath it. I used a white gel pen to add details to the flowers, and then I created a bow out of some twine. I actually took 3 pieces of twine and tied them in a bow together, and I'm using the Gina K Connect glue to adhere it to the bottom of the wreath. So here you can get a closer look at the card. I did add some glossy accent dots to the little berries. It's hard to see in the video, but there's a little bit of shine on the berries, and it adds a bit of dimension. You can also see how the sentiment is set back in the center of the wreath. Okay, my next example shows how you can use the Wreath Builder templates to create something other than a wreath. In this case, a background that's full of images. This time I'm starting with a 5 inch by 5 inch piece of white cardstock. This is bigger than the template, but that's okay. In one corner I put an X. That is the corner that I will always put into the corner of the template. All the other corners of the cardstock will hang out, and that's okay. So I have a leaf that I've positioned, and I'm going to stamp this each time rotating the paper, but making sure that corner with the X is a corner that fits into the template, as you see here. Now I'm going to continue to go around, and I'll form a circle in the top corner of this large square piece. It will be in the corner, but we'll trim this down later, and it'll look really cool. So you'll notice here on my last turn that my MISTI is too small for the paper. See here, the corner on the right is hanging out. You can't close the MISTI door. That's okay. Just put that corner hanging out of the MISTI under the door. Line up the corner with the X into the template and stamp it, and you'll be perfectly fine. Okay, my next image I'm going to put towards the center. I'm not going for a wreath this time, so I want to fill that center up. So I'll put a leaf right in the center there. And since it's so much in the center, it will overlap quite a bit. That's what happens. The closer it is to the center, the more overlap or snug fitting your images will be. But check out this cool pattern that you get by doing this. I think after stamping this, you could definitely leave it and have a really cool looking image. But I ended up continuing on and adding more stamped images to cover the background. But look at this, isn't that cool looking? And I did that with just a small wreath stamp. Okay, so I'm going to continue to add more images. I want to kind of fill this whole card as much as I can and kind of fade out towards the outside edge. But every time I'm putting that corner with the X lined up into the template, the other edges hang off. So you could continue to do your stamping or stop at any point and just kind of have a circle of images. However, I wanted mine to cover as much of the cardstock as I could. But I do end up kind of fading out towards the outside edge, so I'm spacing my images a little bit farther apart. I always like to finish my stamping by taking tiny images and stamping them in the open areas. In this case, I'm using little images to create little red berries throughout the background. Once I'm done, I'll trim this down to 4 by 5 1/4 so that it fits nicely on the front of a note card. And I have the focal point of my background towards the top left. Okay, so now it's time to add a sentiment. I have a sentiment here from the Gina K Autumn Wreath Builder stamp set. I only want the word blessed, so I'm cutting the word blessed off. Doesn't matter if you cut your stamps. You can always use them as they were originally intended by putting the images back together on your acrylic block. This time, I'm just using the word blessed and stamping with VersaMark ink onto the edge of a piece of red cardstock. By the way, this little triangle thing that I use to scoop my embossing powder is a magical bead tray. It's meant for kind of keeping beads in, but I found it was a great scoop in my embossing powder. A lot of people had been asking about that. Once I've stamped my sentiment and heat embossed it, I can put it in my trimmer and trim it down and get a nice little sentiment strip. I added that to the center of our focal point on the background, and then put the stamped piece onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. For a little bit of extra shading, I just added a little bit of marker to the base of the leaves. This takes little time and makes a big difference in giving the feel of dimension on the background. You could skip this if you want to, but you could use any markers or colored pencils for that. On the berries, I put tiny little drops of Ranger Glossy accents just so they'd have a little shine and dimension. So here's a closer look at the final card. So this one isn't a wreath, but rather I used the Wreath Builder template to fill most of the background of this card with tiny little images. It's fun to do and you can get a different look every time. Okay, my last example is super quick and shows how you can use larger images with the Wreath Builder. The bigger the images, the less time the card takes. For this one, I'm using the new Gina K Just a Little stamp set. I really like the unique images in the set, and I'll be using it in my next video also. In this particular card, I'm using the 2 leaf images that are towards the center. So I've positioned one of them in my MISTI, and I just will stamp and turn every time to form a wreath. Again, I'm double stamping just to get a darker image, but you don't have to if you don't want to. But here you can see how a larger image works well with this template. You just want to make sure that it goes from the center out so that you have room to put other images too. So here is the other leaf. I've put it between the first leaves that I stamped. And now I'm stamping this with a darker green ink. So just 2 passes through the Wreath Builder template and we have a full wreath. All I did was add it to a note card and added some little red gems for berries and put a sentiment in the center. That hello friend sentiment is actually coming soon from Gina K. So this again is a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 card. So I have a 4 1/2 inch by 4 1/2 inch white envelope. So there you have more ideas for using the brilliant Wreath Builder template. If you are interested in these supplies, they are linked below. In the middle are a couple other videos that I recommend watching. Thanks for spending time here. I hope you have a great day and we'll see you again soon.